Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this car, which, as you can probably read on the box, is a British armoured car Austin Mk.III World War I era, which just rolls right off the tongue. This is a master box kit in 1/72nd scale, and it's intended to commemorate the 100th anniversary of World War I. The back of the box shows an image of the decal sheet, and a basic painting and marking guide. There's a lot of choices here, which is cool to see, though it could be kind of difficult to pick one. Also cool is the 3D renderings on the side of the box, including an exploded diagram that shows all of the parts. Not so much an instruction set, but just to show all the bits. I like it. Inside the box, plastic sprues. 2 of them. There isn't a huge amount of parts here, and there isn't going to be much left over for the old bits box, but that's okay. As with the previous master box kit I built, the plastic seems to be of fairly decent quality, and this time there are no parts with chunks taken out of them. Also, this time, I've put some effort into not installing major components backwards. Anyway, the detailing here is pretty good. World War I era stuff does have a lot of rivets, and those seem pretty well represented here. Obviously I'm no expert on World War I era armoured cars, or any armoured cars, but I think this looks pretty convincing, and it will probably look a little bit more convincing when it's all together. The parts look quite neat and tidy, and they've been moulded well. The ever-present mould lines are, well, present as ever, but they're not too bad in this kit, and I didn't have to spend a lot of time removing them. The only complaints I really have is that the parts aren't numbered on the sprues, and there was a couple of areas where it wasn't readily apparent where the parts should actually attach to each other, though I was able to figure it out, so I'm sure you can too. As I mentioned earlier, the included decal sheet has quite a few choices, and that's always nice to see. I don't have any immediate plans to paint this, but when I do, I think I'll use the skull and crossbones, just because that looks cool. The instruction sheet is a bit big and unwieldy, and there are a couple of points where the diagrams aren't 100% clear on what you should be doing, but for the most part, the instructions are effective and easy enough to use without getting too confused. Okay, let's glue some plastic together. We start with the frame, which I suppose makes sense. The first thing to do is glue this little wheelie thing into the bottom of the engine here. I had to nudge it with my knife, but it did eventually sit neatly in place. Then the muffler and exhaust part goes on. There's a bit of keying on top of this part that should slot into its space on the frame. It's a little bit fiddly, but definitely not impossible. I follow this with these side framey things. They've also got the leaf springs for the front wheels on them. I did and ah about the position of these a little bit, there isn't really anything to guide them, but I got there in the end. Next, some tiny little hook things. I'm not sure what they're for, maybe for lifting or towing the car. Needless to say, because of their size and lack of anything to guide them, they're a little bit fiddly, but again, I got there in the end, which is what matters. The drivetrain comes next, which is what I guess you would call this. The rear axle comes as 2 parts that glue onto the central shafty bit. These are the technical terms, yes, I know. These parts have D-shaped keying, so you can't put them on all wibbly wobbly, and it's pretty easy to get this put together nice and straight. Why not then attach that to the frame? It's pretty simple. Make sure that you slot the drive shaft into the hole for it where the transmission-y stuff moulded onto the frame ends, and then using the keying attach it to the leaf springs. The front wheelie holding bit comes next. The large bar part is easy enough to get centered due to its shape, which is good because there's no keying. Then the steering bar thing can be added. This is thin and I suspect it would not be hard to break. Also, tweezers were pretty handy here. The front mudguards come next. These aren't that hard to install, but they can be a little bit annoying. There's not much to attach them to and there's no keying, so you have to eyeball their position and try not to be too rough in handling them. Fortunately, you can see the support bracket for these is moulded into both the frame and mudguard, so you can use that to line them up in the proper position. This kit doesn't have an engine, which is probably going to upset some people, but it does have a radiator, which I installed next. This is easy enough to place, though I'm not sure it would really matter if you decided to leave it off. You'll only see this if you look under the vehicle anyway. Not that it's going to hurt anything if you do install it like I've done. Now it's time for wheels. These are simple enough to install into the obvious locations on the ends of the axles. There is a little bit of play in them, so make sure that you've got them on relatively straight. They do look a bit flimsy to me though, so maybe a little bit of misalignment isn't the most unrealistic thing. I then glue the car body onto the frame, which is pretty simple, and I can imagine it would be challenging to put this on backwards or sideways or something, if for some reason you wanted to do that. A bunch of glue to appease the glue god and to hold everything in place, I guess, and it's already looking much more complete. To make it a bit easier for the crew to get in and out of the vehicle, this little step goes on the left side of the frame. Again, there's nothing to guide this, so you just have to eyeball it. We only need one of these because, well, there's no door on the other side. Then a plate goes on the upper rear of the vehicle. I'm assuming that slot in this plate is a vision slot so the gunners can look out the back and see if they're being chased. That way they know to get their banjos out and start playing the chase music. It's probably not the best idea to have an exposed radiator on the front of your armoured car, so this armoured plate goes on. It has a door in it, but that's closed, probably to prevent bullets from entering. The parts are shaped such that they should drop into place with minimal gaps, though there is still a bit of a gap there. It is riveted plates though, so maybe a little bit of a gap is fine. The driver's area is exposed as well, and there isn't really anything interesting in there, so why not cover that with some plates as well? I'm not sure if there's any particular order these plates should go on, and installing them is very simple. There is a bit of a gap at the top that I don't think can be explained away by it being riveted plates, so that might need a bit of putty, but it could be worse. Next, rear mudguards. These have a sort of speedy looking half teardrop shape to them, which I think is interesting. There's a guide on the side of the hull that helps with these quite a lot. They do still need a bit of fiddling and nudging, but they're not that hard to get into place. Next, I add a couple of, I think these are searchlights. Whatever they are, they're tiny and very fiddly to put on, though there is a small mounting thing that they should go into, which does help a bit. Once those are on, the car body is complete, and we must now observe turret time. There are 2 turrets for this vehicle if you didn't see on the front of the box, and they're pretty simple to put together. You start by gluing the machine gun into place, making sure that you've got it the right way up, which is with that little nub facing upwards. I guess that's actually a sight, but nub is a much funnier word, so we'll use nub. The turret walls come next, and that is easy enough, though there was a bit of a gap, and it was worse on one turret than the other. The roof goes on next, and this did take a bit of pressure, but do be careful. It is possible to apply a bit too much pressure. Probably don't do that. If you don't crush it, it actually looks pretty turrety, though it isn't quite finished yet. To complete the turrets, we add these little shieldy things. There are some little nubs on the turrets you should mount these to, and while it did need a bit of eyeballing, it wasn't too difficult to put them on. These do look quite weird, and I don't know, but I'm assuming these are to protect the water cooling jackets on the guns. They look like water-cooled guns to me. Either way, I think it looks interesting. Once you have both turrets together, they can be installed in the obvious location atop the car using the simple locking tab mechanism. And that's it. The 72nd scale Austin Mk.III armoured car by Masterbox is now complete. And I think it's an interesting looking vehicle indeed. I don't know a whole lot about World War I era vehicles, so this is something kind of new to me, and it is nice to try new and different things. Clearly I'm no expert on these armoured cars, so I can't tell you how realistic this model is or isn't, but I think it looks very good. I'm convinced. There's some good looking rivet detail, and I think it's going to paint up really nicely one day. Rivets and things like that can make weathering a lot of fun. I don't have any plans to paint this model in the immediate future, but if it is something you really want to see, let me know in the comments, and I'll give it some consideration. This model was pretty simple to put together, though I don't think I would recommend it to a brand new beginner modeler. There were a few parts that you have to eyeball and figure out the position for yourself without any keying or anything like that. And that isn't really a bad thing, it just might confuse some. That said, I did enjoy the build and it was relatively quick. I'm pretty sure I put it together in one stream, though it was a while ago and I am old and forgetful. Either way, it was an enjoyable time. As with pretty much every model I make a video about, I built this live on stream. If you would like to watch me build models and join myself and the good folks in chat, head on over to twitch.tv/Herbert_Erpaderp or follow the handy dandy link in the description. It'll be fun times. We have the best worst jokes and sometimes there's giveaways. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to put those in the comment section below. And if you've not done so already, why not subscribe, follow, ring the bell, become a patron or YouTube member, or maybe just come say hi on Discord or Twitch. And if you're feeling really helpful, why not share this video with your friends or anybody you think might get something out of it. Links to all of my things are in the description below, and as always, I shall return soon. So, until then, be excellent to each other, and thank you for watching. Farewell.